not going to be easy, you know. Nothing worthwhile is. Uncharted is the long-awaited live-action adaptation of the well-loved adventures of Nathan Drake and company, and it delivers on some literal high-stakes action, puzzling historical treasure hunts, and hey, about 1.5 hours of cinematics, just like the games. Directed by Ruben Fleischer, this movie lives in its own world, but pulls a lot from the Uncharted video games, with an ending that could set up more movies. We'll break all of that down, plus all the Easter eggs we could find. But before we dive in from a plane or something, I must warn you, we're about to spoil this entire movie, some parts of the games, and where we think this is all headed now. So if you haven't seen it yet, or you just don't want to know what we think, now would be when to take a perfectly timed leaping dodge out of the way. Think of it as your own personal QuickTime event.
Oh, crap!
Hey kid, a little young for a bartender, aren't you?
A little old for prom, aren't you?
By now, you've already seen stars Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg on the poster and thought, can they pull off the Nate and Sully I know and love? Well, if you view this more as a prequel or origin story to this iconic pairing, it'll flow much better to our game-focused brains. Or at least my game-focused brain, anyway. So, did they pull it off? Well, it was a slow burn, but yeah, they grow toward it, and it all builds to make more and more sense in the finale and beyond, so that's where we'll start. The end. But before I do, keep in mind, this movie is in theaters only, so it's not like we can show you any footage that has been put out in trailers and stuff, so we'll do the best we can with those clips, plus footage from the games to kind of fill in the gaps. Cool?
This is gonna take a little longer than I thought, kid.
Summing up, Nathan Drake is recruited by Victor Sullivan to help him recover Magellan's lost and sizable treasure somewhere in Barcelona. Nathan initially isn't interested until Sully brings up Sam Drake, Nate's beloved brother who disappeared as a teenager after giving Nathan the famous Sic Parvis Magna ring and hasn't contacted him since except for some postcards. So Nate and Sully follow the trail to Barcelona where they meet Chloe Fraser, who is less than happy to be working with either of them and is keen to recover the treasure herself, but they realize working together is the only way and Nathan might be the only one who can figure everything out. The trail takes them out of Spain to the Philippines, where they're followed by Braddock, a mercenary working against the trio to claim the treasure for her boss, then later herself. We, the audience, learn that while Chloe seemed to be Team Nate, she was actually also working for the antagonist, Antonio Moncada, who also feels he is entitled to the treasure. Anyway, Nathan figures out the obfuscated solution to pinpoint the treasure with help from Sam's postcards. He plants a false lead for Chloe to take in one of her sudden and inevitable betrayals and discovers the treasure on his own. Hidden in a blocked-off cove, 2 of Magellan's massive galleons, intact and stuffed full of that sweet, sweet golden treasure. Sully shows up having followed Nate there, and they discuss whether Nate can trust Sully or not, which has been a theme the entire movie.
Both you turn your keys clockwise at the same time.
Clockwise, Sully!
Well, it was 50-50, so I made a guess.
Clearly.
Braddock and her goons show up and attempt to airlift the 2 ships out via helicopters, leading to a sky-high, swashbuckling pirate ship battle. A very Uncharted thing to have. But with helicopters.
What?
In the end, Sully chooses to save Nathan's life but loses the billions of dollars in treasure to do it. But thankfully, Nathan pocketed a small amount of gold, so they are happy about that at least as the 2 of them fly away. Chloe is seen boating away, less happy. It's a fairly straightforward movie about the characters becoming themselves, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. It also isn't really a retelling of any of the games, but takes some broader elements from here and there. For example, the 2022 Uncharted is centered on the search for Magellan's treasure, which is precisely what the 2018 Nathan Fillion starring Uncharted fan film spent most of its time setting up. That may be a coincidence due to the fan film not being canon, but it could very well also be another homage, just like the characters themselves also seem to be homages to the originals, not really hitting the exact same characterization beats, but largely pulling in the general ideas. Maybe it's because I've seen Spider-Man No Way Home too recently, but Tom Holland's boyish charm as Peter Parker reads loud and clear in his Nathan Drake, especially early in the film. This is different from the game's Nathan Drake, who is decidedly more of an adult, albeit a lovable scamp of an adult, he could get there. Perhaps another similarity to Spider-Man, Tom may be in this series for the long haul. Sully too reads differently. He's got a harder edge and comes off as slicker, younger, and more selfish. Something that's key to why the Uncharted games work is the relationship and partnership between Nate and Sully, and since they meet for the first time here, it's just not built out yet. The best way to think of this all is a prequel to the main action of Uncharted. This gets solidified with Nathan and Chloe meeting for the first time in the movie, something older in-game Nathan and Chloe refer to in Among Thieves. At Uncharted 2's point in the chronology, they already had a history and baggage about leaving her in their younger years prior to that game. This, I suppose, is that baggage. I will say, it's a little weird. Sully seems to have known Sam, Chloe, and Braddock very well prior to the action of the movie, given that they all seem to be in their early 20s, and he isn't. But maybe treasure hunting's a young person's game.
I beg to differ.
Your brother believed that there was a final piece.
Wait, you know my brother Sam?
Alright, so like I said before, there are two mid-credit scenes in this one. The first one answers a long-standing mystery. What happened to Sam Drake, Nathan's brother? This is the question that drives Nathan throughout most of the movie. He carries around several cryptic postcards from his long-missing brother Sam. The movie tells us Sam was killed by Braddock in a mission gone wrong, which Uncharted 4 at Thief's End players are right to scoff at, because of course Sam's not dead. He is shown in a desolate, stone-walled prison, looking worse for the wear. In his hands he holds another postcard meant for Nate with a hidden message of warning. He needs to watch his back. But from who? I'm gonna come back to this in a minute, so stick with me. The credits roll until we catch up with Nate a bit later on in a new location. He is bartering away his beloved ring he always wears around his neck to a man named Gage for, quote, an old Nazi map. Nate specifically asks why his ring is so important to Gage's boss, Roman. Yes, I know, we will get to that very soon, I promise. The deal turns sour when Gage grabs both the map and the ring as his men turn on Nate, cornering him. Surprise! Sully shows up to the rescue, and if you mustache, yes, he is looking more like his in-game inspiration, almost exactly like young Sully in Drake's Deception. Sully stands off with the men while Nathan manages to double-cross Gage right back. Nate and Sully turn to leave for the next part of their caper, victorious, when something off-camera is really shocking and upsetting them, but we never find out what, leaving us on a cliffhanger for the next adventure. No puzzles here, this is a transparently clear setup for a sequel, and if that happens, the second credit scene makes what the sequel could be pretty clear, unless it doesn't. How very Uncharted of you, movie. If the name Roman sounds familiar, that's because Gabriel Roman was a villain in the very first Uncharted game. He tailed Nate and Sully, much like characters do in this movie, as they went on their quest to discover El Dorado and the tomb of Nate's alleged ancestor, Sir Francis Drake, because Sully owed him money, which checks out with both versions of Sully. In the game, Roman ends up holding our heroes at gunpoint and Nathan begrudgingly hands over the map, but Roman shoots Sully anyway and then holds him captive. So, you could have that to look forward to. Mark Wahlberg, whoever could play Roman, also has fun stuff to look forward to. As it turned out, Nathan's ring bore the coordinates to the tomb. Again, very similar to in this movie how the cross keys were actually a compass to the treasure, but who's counting? The game also featured a wrecked Nazi U-boat and the bodies of officers who died in pursuit of El Dorado. All this together implies our next adventure will be based on Uncharted: Drake's Fortune.
It's Drake.
Or could it be this is just an in-betweener nod before another mostly original story? A key point of Drake's Fortune is that it's more in the middle of Drake and Sully's partnership, not the beginning, and both are significantly older and more experienced to the point that a certain reporter would be joining them on the adventure. Fans would likely be very interested in meeting Elena, who could probably be written as a documentary-style content creator trying to make a name for herself if we are still doing the Muppet Babies versions of the game characters. And let's not forget, Sam is alive, which means he can come back into play at any time. Even though we don't meet him until the 4th Uncharted game, it seems likely he'll be back sooner rather than later. In-game, it's at first believed Sam died in a prison break, and he's already in prison, so he's already halfway to being back. But who did he want Nathan to be wary of? It could be Sully, once again, but hopefully it's a character we haven't been introduced to yet. It might be slightly jarring for a movie that has a mostly original story with references and bits pulled in to suddenly go down a set, linear route by remaking a 15-year-old game. Maybe we'll see a Drake's Fortune adaptation next, and maybe we'll see a different story loosely based on it, or maybe we'll see a new story entirely. But the filmmakers are showing us the doors kicked wide open, and they won't be shy with melding in more from the games.
Okay, whoa, let me guess. Pina colada?
And, of course, now it's time to round up the rest of the Easter eggs we found in a movie that is basically one giant Easter egg. Whatever, you know what I mean. Here's what we got. Nathan has a Naughty Dog logo sticker in his box of mementos, an obvious reference to Naughty Dog, the company, publishers of Uncharted and The Last of Us. Maybe the game company exists in the movie's world. Maybe there's a cool game series called Not Mapped Yet, starring Kevin Polo. There is a pink neon sign at a bar that reads "Kitty Got Wet," which is a reference to Game Nathan's cringy catchphrase from the games.
Kitty got wet.
Ugh, I hate it. Also, a lookout warning to Sully's new BFF, Mr. Whiskers. You could be the next joke set up for that one. The opening scene references the games in two ways. For one, Nathan is in an extremely dangerous position, hanging from dangling cargo from the back of a mid-flight plane. He tries to climb the netting to get back on in a very clear reference to Uncharted 3 when he's doing the exact same thing, albeit closer to ground level in a different location. Secondly, the framing of this climactic action scene is actually late in the story, but it serves as a jolting, suspenseful opening scene before flashing to an earlier, more peaceful point in time and telling the story mostly chronologically until that point. This is a technique used in Uncharted 2, albeit dangling from a train. Nolan North, the voice actor behind the video game Nathan Drake, has a pretty obvious cameo as a guy at the resort in the Philippines Nathan and Chloe meet after they wash up ashore. North is pretty much an A-list video game voiceover actor, but if you aren't quite sure who the man might be, the dialogue hits you over the head with it. Trust me. Several scenes play out like stealth gaming scenes, like when Sully and Nate are sneaking and hiding from Braddock behind crates on the plane. There are puzzles to solve, much like the games. I mentioned it earlier, but the ultimate path to the treasure involves Nathan taking the cross artifacts apart, sticking them on a map, and turning them to divine coordinates. He also correctly identifies the pine tree on the Barcelona map to mean a church with pine in its name, and successfully cracks the other riddles around the church to take them to the secret room. In pursuit of Nathan and the gold, Braddock radios to her team aboard two different vessels, the Victoria and the Trinidad. These were ship names in Magellan's actual fleet. Maybe she's into history. Who knew? While Nathan and Sully are divergent from their in-game characters, Chloe is probably the closest to her original, right down to her choice of red clothing and a corded bead necklace when we first meet her. She has severe trust problems and problems of being trustworthy, has a complicated relationship with her father, an unscrupulous man, and even implores Nathan to dance with her in the club scene, maybe referencing her Uncharted 2 line, "Just dance with the one who brought you, all right? You'll have your Lost Legacy moment one day, Chloe." Nate fiddles with Sam's lighter throughout the entire movie, which is an important prop in A Thief's End, along with his sick Parvis Magna ring, a crucially important item in terms of sentimentality and usefulness in the first game, Drake's Fortune. Greatness from small beginnings indeed. The auction scene itself is reminiscent of the auction scene in A Thief's End, the fourth game. Maybe they'll loop back around to another auction scene and end it more smoothly. At one point, Nathan says, "Nuns. Why's it always gotta be nuns?" in a clear reference to Indiana Jones' famous line about snakes, but about the nuns inside the Barcelona church. If you didn't clock that one, don't worry, they say Indiana Jones in reference to it after when Chloe and Sully repeatedly make fun of Nathan's supposed fear of nuns. Drawing a circle around it makes jokes funnier, I guess. But what did you think of Uncharted? Did they stick close enough to the games while still doing their own thing? And what's gonna happen in a sequel? Let's hear your best theories in the comments below. Anyway, thanks for watching this episode of Canon Fodder, and for more Uncharted, check out our full review, and don't forget to follow and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.
5 billion, easy.
So when do we start?
Yeah, put that in your ear.
Hello? Hello?
I can hear you. I'm sitting right next to you.